Welcome one and all to this fun competition, except nobody knows if there's any opposition. Face so friendly, smile disarms, everything's good, no cause for alarm. Cause I'm like you, and likewise the same. But for you this is work, and for me it's a game. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. Next round starting, believe that I'm playing. Introduction's not needed, been completed so to speak. Since I always act familiar each and every time we meet. We're not colleagues, you've never even heard of me, but I'm just so polite.
Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 43. We just found out that this number is 10 more than the years Jordan has spent on this planet.
Correct.
I don't know what that means about anything for this podcast, but except that you're young, and that's good.
That is good.
And now I feel old, which is not good.
You're not old. It just means that you have the benefit of experience under your belt.
I'm decrepit, according to that.
Whether you use that experience or just act senile, though, that part is
that's true.
Somewhat within your control.
Yes. Yeah. What'd you say?
Yeah. Hold on, my hearing aids are ringing.
Oh, man. Let's not even get into that. No. Whole separate discussion. Hearing aids ringing in public places. So, Jordan, how's life?
Good, man. Good. I'm on vacay with my parents, which is kind of funny. Went up to San Francisco, which is nice. I know a lot of tech people live there, and we saw lots of them nerding out. So
wait, they were outside?
He went at the tail end of RSA.
Oh, I was going to say, because if they were outside, they weren't real geeks, so.
Right. No, they were just wearing well, it's weird to walk around in San Francisco sometimes because you'll be at a coffee shop and some dude will have a Discuss, like the comments plugin, pullover, or a fleece from couchsurfing.org. And you're like, what is that all about? Where do you even get something like that? And the answer is you probably work at their, 6-man startup. And you're one of the dudes in the office, and your office happens to be near Chinatown, or everybody in the whole company, which is a handful of people, went out for Chinese food at the same restaurant. That type of thing.
Yeah, well, San Francisco's cool. I like it.
It was freezing. I'll say that much.
Freezing? Really? What's freezing? I just want to know.
Well, now that I don't live in Michigan anymore, and I live in L.A., 46 degrees.
Oh, so like summer, in essence.
In Alaska, maybe.
That's so weird because I was there 3 days before Jordan was, so we just missed each other. And it was glorious weather. It was sunny and bright, like a weird day in San Francisco where it didn't have a marine layer, and everyone was walking around in T-shirts and shorts. And I was like, is it me or is it unseasonably warm? And they're like, it's glorious. It's like summer.
Yeah, I mean, I spent February in Canada and Seattle, which was, for me, abnormally warm. Being in the 40s during February is ridiculous. I mean, we got snow right now and 20-something degrees. So that's cold.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it does. For winter, it does. So 46 sounds like the beginning of spring to me.
Yeah. Well, it's 61 in LA right now, so you guys can enjoy that.
Thanks, yeah.
Lovely.
Ping, how's life?
Life is pretty darn good. Couple of notes. Black Hat opened its call for papers, and it closes fairly soonishly. I think April 1. Yep, and the trainings are all listed, and I saw that Chris Hadnagy's training is being publicized up there.
Woohoo!
Social engineering course, and I believe you have a few registrants in there already. I suggest if people are going to register sooner than later because Black Hat has a habit of selling out on its courses.
That is quite true. Last year we sold out, I think it was in 3 weeks.
Yep. I'm going to be in Black Hat Europe next week and hanging out with people from the other side of the desk. Instead of being behind the desk, I'll be on the receipt. Actually, that's not true. I'm working the registration desk at Black Hat Amsterdam.
Unbelievable.
Never mind.
I thought you were going to be just going to enjoy yourself.
That is how Ping enjoys herself.
Oh, that's true. Working is enjoyable for Ping.
Yeah, chill. She's like, I've been so stressed lately. I just want to run a conference or something and just kind of decompress.
Yeah, that is true. I do forget about Ping. I'm going to go run a conference to decompress.
How do you do that? But wait, Jordan, where are you going to be in a few weeks?
I'm going to be in North Korea.
Oh, because that's where all tech people go.
That's where I go to decompress.
Yeah.
I go to the world's most restrictive regime, the pariah state known as North Korea.
Now,
and a lot of people right now are like, he means South Korea because he's, but really I don't. And no, I'm not going with Dennis Rodman.
Okay, I was just going to ask because, as restrictive as they are, I find that humorous that they invited Dennis Rodman there.
I agree. I mean,
I didn't understand that.
I mean, a cross-dressing, makeup-wearing, 7-foot-tall black dude that was probably the most offensive basketball player ever in the history of mankind gets invited to the most oppressive government in the world.
Yeah, the man loves attention. What can I say?
Well, apparently now he loves North Korea.
Yeah, because he says he loved the dictator, he loved the government, he loved the people. Quite interesting.
Well, the finances of North Korea and the finances of Dennis Rodman are in similar condition right now.
So he needed the publicity stunt?
Right, so I think it was kind of a mutual back-scratching type thing. Like, hey, bro, we're both broke. Let's rock a little stunt ski and see if we can get some funds.
And also North Korea is giving virtual asylum to Pirate Bay.
I heard... And I think that's amazingly... You know what that says to me? And I'll get serious for 1 second here because I know how much we hate that. I think that's a lot of crap because, this is a rights group, right? This freedom sharing. And I'll admit, I download stuff from there sometimes, right? When I can't find it legally available for purchase, of course. And so...
Well, no, what you need to say is people who may have done that are like you.
Of course.
You don't exactly do that yourself.
I don't even know how to use BitTorrent. I don't have views installed on my MacBook Pro and stuff. So.
That's right.
But what it means to me is to have a rights group, right? If you're a rights group and you're like, we need digital freedom, we don't want all these restrictions, and then you go and you host your stuff in a state that abuses its people like North Korea does, you are really saying, hey, we're this rights group, but we only really care about our rights. We don't care about other people's rights. And also our cause is important, but the other cause, that whole freedom from prison camps and oppression, it's not really that important to us, at all.
Yeah, that's exactly my thought. It's here you got this group that, picketing and we're all for freedom, and then they host it in a country that basically has concentration camps.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to avoid hosting anything anywhere that doesn't have any human rights violations. I mean, I guess you could host it in Iceland, some postmodern utopia or whatever.
Yeah.
And I get why they need to host something in, say, China or Asia or someplace where things are a little bit less, are a little bit more isolated. But I mean, really, those funds are going towards. And I can't be too judgmental because the tour groups I bring there for purposes of engagement, I have no control where that money goes. So at some level, that's there. But I'm not running a human rights group. I'm not talking about freedom. I'm talking about engagement. And some of the necessary evils for that engagement are bringing people to the country, which costs money. Now that said, I don't think that. I'm not accusing the Pirate Bay of propping up the North Korean regime with the funds. They probably make them some money, but not that much. But I just think, if you're going to be a morality-based cause, aka digital freedom or a la digital freedom, then you might want to look at the fact that you're blatantly flying in the face of that where you've chosen to host your new stuff.
I also think it makes them more of a target for. Let's say the U.S. government who is actively hunting them, and now they make themselves more of a target by siding with one of the biggest enemies of that government.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be embarrassed when North Korea opens up and they find out exactly what's been going. The stories we're going to hear out of that place are going to be, it's going to be the Holocaust 2.0, bigger, better, expanded, revision 2 or whatever. And I don't mean that as a joke. I just mean. The camps that are there are larger than the ones that the Germans ran. There's more of them, and they've been in existence for 40 years or 50 years longer or something like that than the ones that were.
You saw that story of that dude who escaped, right?
Yeah.
And he was born in the camp?
The guy who was born in the prison camp.
I mean, so those stories, I imagine, are going to be and this is not a joke, but they're going to be a dime a dozen.
Yeah. And he was the only one to escape from a prison camp that was born in one. So imagine the other 18,000 people in the same situation. and that's just the ones born in there that are kids. There's one prison camp there. I don't remember the name of it. It might be Yodok or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's larger than Los Angeles in terms of square footage.
Holy cow.
And so when you look at that on Google Maps, larger than LA, which is, if you've ever been to LA, one of the most spread out cities in the country, if not the world. I mean, this is like 10 cities all smashed together into one. This camp is larger than Los Angeles, and it's a total control zone, which means you die when you go there. So everybody, 50,000 plus people who live in this thing, they're all just going to work themselves to death, just like World War II.
Yikes.
Because they folded a picture of Kim Jong-il and sat on it by mistake because they couldn't see because they had glaucoma or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or they said something like, the power went out. This sucks. Now their whole family's in jail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or their previous generations did something.
Right, yeah, your grandfather
on his deathbed said something terrible about the government, and now you're being punished for it.
Exactly.
Anyhow, that is not our normal topic for the podcast, but interesting nonetheless. I will be interested to hear your stories when you come back of this trip.
If he comes back.
He'll come back. He's making the money, and I think they know it.
Word.
Tourism.
For sure.
Which is amazing to me, because that's one place I actually have no desire to go. But anyhow, on to actual business things before we get our guest on. How is your business end of your life besides your vacation end of your life?
Oh, it's good. We've been sold out. Our programs have been sold out until August, so we keep adding dates where we can, just because we're trying to figure out how to. I almost said service more people, but you know what I'm saying. It's
great. So you admitted to pirating software. You admitted to tourism in a terrible country, and now servicing.
Right, and my name is Dave Kennedy.
Yeah.
It's Kennedy.
Excellent, and he's not even here to defend himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're adding dates where we can. If guys want to come through a boot camp in New York, those have been sold out since November. But guys from this show I know are really busy. Like a lot of these InfoSec dudes are slammed and their schedule's weird. So if somebody wants me to squeeze them in New York, let me know. I'll do what I can. But otherwise, running stuff out here in LA. Just like I said, hired a new guy to help coach as well, because there's 8 of us here, but we're still all slammed and really busy, which is why I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I understand that. I actually understand that need, because in April I'm going to Scotland and then taking a small trip to Europe, some other places for vacation, just because of the same thing. I've been slammed, which is a great problem to have, so no complaining, but it's been all over. I mean, I think in the last year I have 100,000 sky miles flying around the globe. I mean, I'm going to Japan in a little bit, and all the training.
That's cool.
Yeah, all the training just everywhere. I've been around the Earth training in the UK. Going to be in Ireland. Ping mentioned we got the Black Hat class coming up. I have one in Detroit. A very exotic location there.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah, and I'm taking Ping's advice. I'm going to give this public credit. Ping told me, let's think about a year ago, that I was stupid. I think her exact words were not stupid. They were something that involved lots of F-cursing.
I was frustrated.
Frustrated cursing, that's what I'm
frustrated, that's the F word she used. And that I was stupid for having my classes all over creation, that I should pick 4 locations and have one each quarter and make those the locations that we go to train, and then people will know where to go and what to expect and when to expect it. So as of 2014, we are implementing that plan in our company here to have 4 locations throughout the earth that will host SE training, and we're working on an advanced class right now, which is going to be pretty hot. So thank you, Ping, for the good advice, because it is a lot less stressful, all joking aside. Just even thinking about it is less stressful, and when we're planning it, instead of wondering if we're going to be in some place like Belfast that bombs are going off, which, by the way, that class may actually be getting changed to a different location this week. because of that reason. I guess there's been some uprises and like 23 cops were hurt and a grenade was thrown in one of their cars.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So now the guy who's helping me organize it, is like, hey, we may need to change the location. So
So you're going to have it in Baghdad instead.
Yeah, we figured Iran or Iraq might be safer than Belfast. So no, we're going to probably move it somewhere less blow-uppy and more safe.
More stabby, less explosive.
Yeah, because if one of my students gets stabbed, they can live. If they get blown up, it's just bad.
Yeah, that's
you know that. I mean, you've had students like handcuff people, so that's okay.
I did. Did we tell we told this story,
We
right?
did it,
Yeah,
but we should
okay.
tell it. We didn't tell it on the podcast, but we should tell it at the end, okay? Let's make them wait, so they have to listen.
That's fine.
Because
if I'm here at the end, we can tell it at the end.
Oh, yeah, okay. I forgot about that. If not, then we have to remember next time, because now people are going to be curious.
Yes.
So, our guest today is Seena Sharp. Seena is a competitive intelligence expert. So what she does is she helps companies learn how to gather competitive intelligence, what's good, what's not, the best ways to gather intelligence on their competition as well as their own companies. And, of course, social engineering, learning how to gather information better. Well, this is just the perfect topic for us. So, going to get Seena on. Okay, so we have our guest with us, Seena Sharp. Seena, it's nice to have you with us today.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
So first of all, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it is that a competitive intelligence gatherer does.
Okay. Well, what competitive intelligence is it's due diligence. So, like financial people really believe in and engage in due diligence when they're investing in a company or merging or studying another company. They get all kinds of financial information in order to make sure that the company is financially sound and that when they move forward, their risks are minimized. What competitive intelligence is, or another word for it is market intelligence, is market due diligence, and that is understanding the marketplace, where you are selling to, where your customers are, where everything will be happening for you from today forward. And this applies whether it's B2B, business to business, B2C, nonprofit, educational. It applies across the board. The more we understand the reality of the marketplace, that's what market intelligence is, the more we understand the reality of the marketplace, the more likely we are to be successful and not make poor decisions.
So tell us about you. How did you get into this? What is it that caused you to become an expert at this?
Right. Well, that's a long story. I have a background in mathematics. I have a bachelor's and master's in mathematics. And when I got out of school a very long time ago, there were very limited choices for women. And so I started out doing actuarial work for a large insurance company in New York City. And I quickly discovered that wasn't for me. But I didn't know what else was because, again, I didn't have any female role models, and it was a very different time. Fortunately, I had an old boyfriend who was working at an ad agency, and when I saw what he was doing, it looked really interesting. And so 50 interviews, and 9 months later, I found a job that is not all that different from what I'm doing today. But in those days, there was no term market intelligence or due diligence. Those things just didn't exist. It was understanding what was happening outside your company that could impact you, what you needed to know. And so then I went on to work in an ad agency where we always had to be current on what was happening so that our creative people could create the ads that they needed to, and we could get new business in companies about which we knew nothing. And we knew nothing about those industries because ad agencies are always going after new businesses. And then when I moved to California, I started my own business and realized that companies, again, being in New York, and in those times everything was very internal. I didn't understand the external marketplace, that businesses really don't pay attention to what's going on because they're so passionate and they so fiercely believe that they know their business, they know their industry and customers better than anybody else, and don't think they have anything to learn, unlike the financial people who understand that things are changing and there may be things that they don't know. And so in business, you just see this repeatedly, where companies make mistakes, make poor decisions, have to redo the decisions, which cost time and money and morale, and they have to redo those decisions because they made assumptions about the marketplace that either was based on information that either is no longer true or maybe was never true. But more importantly, they're missing what's changing and emerging. And that's why this is all so relevant to today. Because if you believe that we live in a changing, volatile, unpredictable world, you really can't forecast that. You have to know what's current. And it's almost impossible to do that unless you have an objective view of your industry and the forces that are impacting it.
I have a quick question. How old is the term competitive intelligence? Since, obviously you just told us you kind of came up through the ad agency side and where it was basically probably just market research, I guess.
Right. It's about 30 years old. About 30 years old. Yeah. One of the problems with the term is because competitive sounds like competitor, and so people think it's knowing everything you need to know about your competitors. And for me, this is a huge mistake. In fact, in my book, I devote a whole chapter to it on why fixating on your competitors is misguided. And companies would be far better served by looking externally at what is going on in the marketplace, what customers want, what customers are buying, and less focusing on their competitors. Yes, you have to know what they're doing, of course. You have to keep up with them to see, have they figured out something that you haven't, a new feature on their product or a new a customer group to go after or a different distribution channel. So you have to have some understanding of what's going on with your competitors. But when companies say that they just want to beat their competitors and that's their focus, it's really a poor use of their time. Because in business is not a zero-sum game like sports in which you have a winner and a loser. In business, in the same industry, you can have dozens, hundreds, thousands of successful companies, and you too can be successful. So it's far better to focus on who's buying your product and service and why, and where are the opportunities in the marketplace.
So let's go that avenue, because see, for us in our field, information is the key. The more information we have on a company or a target, the better it is for us, the more successful we'll be. So that last statement you said, it's better for you to understand these things than it is the actual competitor itself. How do you gather that intel? How do you go about now getting that information?
There are formal and informal ways. Probably the most popular, quote, formal way would be when people do a Google search. They think that everything that you want to know is going to be on the Internet and you can get it easily, and Google is something we're all very familiar with. And I use Google all the time. But you have to understand, Google is not a good source of business information. Now, obviously, depending on what you're getting, you may get it from Google. But if you don't think that's because it doesn't exist. It's because it's not in Google. And there are literally thousands of very important, relevant sources that are not in Google because those companies will not allow their information to be there. So you'll very rarely find anything from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or trade publications. Some of them, yes. Most of them, no. So Google is a good place to start. If you can't find it there and you want to use that kind of general search engine, I suggest you use Bing, which is Microsoft's answer to Google. There's an overlap, but you'll also get other information, so it's good to get it that way. Google News even is better than Google. Google News is more likely to have more, quote, serious and business information. Then there are the fee-based services like LexisNexis and Dialog and Factiva. These are companies that have access to tens of thousands of publications, and they can search it very quickly for what you need. There's a cost to it, and they're not easy to use, so you're better off having somebody who specializes in that find the information for you, unless you're going to be using it a lot, in which case it would be worth your while to become a frequent user and a subscriber to it. But there are a lot of other places to get information. Trade publications and associations are an outstanding source of specific information. Now, that's not as easy as going to Google, where you can get a whole big array of information, but it's much more specific and probably more relevant. There are local newspapers for information to find it. We find there's government information also. We don't use as much government information because we find it doesn't match up with business information sufficiently for the kind of information we're looking for our clients. And then finally, there's what they call human information, and that's mostly what we do, and that is finding the right people who know what our clients want to know. So that tends to be much more strategic information, much more current, much more future-focused, but it's extremely time-consuming, and you really have to know how to speak to people and do this all ethically. So there are many, many different ways to get information. The point is, I can guarantee you that 95%, if not more, of the information you want to know does exist. There's very, very little that you can't get.
So when you're talking about HumanIt, you're interacting with people, obviously, because what you just said, is it that they know that you're sourcing them for information?
Oh, yes, we're very upfront about it when we call them. But the challenge is, if you know, it's like every other business has their skills, if you know how to do what you're doing. So we tell them who we are. We're very upfront. We don't tell them our client's name. And if you know how to speak to people, they will talk to you and tell you what you want to know. And it's all, as I said, it's all upfront. And if they, we don't use any subterfuge and, pretend we're students or, say we're writing an article for somebody. It's all up front.
So in your book, in Chapter 6, you talk a little bit about this topic, and then this actually starts with your first step about knowing what questions to ask, having the right questions to ask.
Yes.
So how do you determine then what the right questions are?
This takes time because you can't just call somebody and say, what are your sales, or who are your customer targets, things like that. You can't do that. You have to really think about what it is you want to know and to have a discussion. And so you have to spend the time to think about what you want the final report, if you will, to look like. Even if you're not producing a final report, think of it in that way. Think of it in that way. And what would be the information in there? And then make questions out of them or make statements out of them. So you have to do this over a period of time, because you will think of some of them the first time you sit down. 2 hours later, you'll think of others. 3 hours later, you'll think of more questions when you're in the shower, when you're sleeping. So this is an evolving process about what the questions are. But you have to ask as I say, the right questions in order to get the right information.
So do you ever use sources like maybe people who left a certain company or an industry because either they were laid off or they're disgruntled? Do you find them to be good sources of information in the type of business you do?
Yeah, I don't use them. I know there are other companies that do. We don't use them for two main reasons. First of all, you don't know if they're giving you disinformation if they are disgruntled, number one. And number two, once they've left, their information is no longer current. That doesn't mean it doesn't have some value, and it may still apply to that company, but you don't know. And so we generally don't speak to former employees. We don't seek them out.
Interesting. Okay.
But there is let me tell you about another hidden source of information that companies never think about, and that's local newspapers, especially if you're trying to find information on companies or on people. Because when people, very often companies want to get their name in the press in some way, or a reporter is doing a story and will cover a company. Well, if you can't find it from the major newspapers, the Chicago Tribune, the San Francisco Examiner, for example, the big newspapers, what we suggest is find the local newspapers, because when people speak with them, their guard is down because they don't think of them that anybody is reading it or anybody important is reading it. So, for example, I'm in Los Angeles. all of the major Japanese auto manufacturers are in Torrance, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. The local paper that serves Torrance, which is a pretty large area, is called the Daily Breeze. Well, they cover the automotive industry far, far, far more extensively than does the LA Times. And so if you want to know about any of those any of those companies, you're far better off doing a search or calling the Daily Breeze to see what they've covered. They are doing interviews all the time. They're keeping up with the changes and what's happening. You'll get better information, more current information, and more thorough information. So the local papers are a very good source, and sometimes even more local papers if you're looking for information on people. So whether it's where they live or where they work. And in terms of companies, don't just think about the headquarters. Also think about the local newspapers for where they may have branch offices or factories.
So before you mentioned that, at least in your business, you never use what we would call pretexting. So you don't ever act like you're looking to get a story, or you're a reporter or a student or something to that effect.
No.
So when you're approaching a source and you're gathering intel, and they obviously know that you're gathering this intel, and they may be able to discern it's for competitive intelligence. How do you get around that? Like if you're trying to gather intel from me, let's say, and I discern that you're doing this to help a competitor of mine, I'm not going to want to be too forthcoming with information on how to gain market share in my industry, because you're going to then turn around and help my competition with that information.
Right. Well, what we usually, will tell them is that we're doing research on an industry for a company, and so we just talk about it. But as I said, if you know how to speak to people, they very quickly put that out of their minds. And as they're talking, they talk generally, and then they start talking specifically about their own company, and as well as talking about their competitors. So it's a matter also of triangulating the information. You need to get it from many different sources at many different levels, many different functions, in order to gain consensus and see if you're hearing the same thing over and over again. But it's important to be as broad and deep as you possibly can, because that will be much more thorough. Sometimes you don't need that much information. Sometimes what you need is much more general, and so you don't need to do the human part of it. But if you're looking for strategic information, even if it's not on a company, it may just be on the industry. What are the changes that are happening? The best people to know it are specific people in a company. But it's not the old days. If you wanted to know about strategy, you talked to the person in charge of strategy. You wanted to know about R&D, you spoke to that person. Today, there are so many people in a company who have real insight and understanding that it's not necessarily the person who does it. They're just one of the people that has the right information.
So you have to be an expert at building rapport with people quickly.
It is a skill. All these things that we think are just so easy to do are not when you're really looking for specific results.
So do you have specific training or things that you do to teach the people you work with on how to do that? Because building rapport may come natural to some. You seem like a really friendly person, but I don't know if that's you by nature or if that's something you learn. So how do you teach the people you work with to become experts at rapport building?
It's rapport building, and it's also understanding business. What people fail to realize when they're looking for information, or they're trying, they're making some sort of decision, is that it's not enough to have specific information about a company or an industry. It's really important to understand how business works and what's relevant to business and what's changing and shifting today. And so it's more than having rapport. That's a piece of it, but it's also understanding other things having to do with business, and so that when you speak to people, you can bring in the larger marketplace into the discussion as a question, and that also helps to elicit the specific information you're seeking.
Yeah, that sounds very much like what the same type of principles, except you don't use pretexting.
I
Don't do
guess
pretexting.
I'm still a little bit stuck on the motivation for the target, so to speak, to start spilling his guts. What like if I'm taking a meeting with you, why am I taking that meeting, and then why am I suddenly getting chatty? I mean, do you just fill me up with margaritas or what? I mean, what's the trick?
On the phone, that's a little challenging, but if you have any suggestions, I'm very open to them.
They have mail-in margarita, right?
Exactly. Well, the reason is it's because of the human characteristics is that we all like to be flattered and to feel good about what we're doing. And quite frankly, nobody talks to you about what you do in business. Your family, your friends, your workers, nobody talks to you about it. You may talk about a specific thing, but nobody really cares about what you're doing in business. We are very interested. And when you have somebody who's really interested in what you're doing, it's very engaging. And it really makes you feel good because you feel like you're the expert and you really know something. And so people will very easily speak to us because, again, we're having a dialogue. We're not running, it's not like market research where you're asking a whole bunch of questions or you're doing a survey. We're having a conversation, and we're very interested in what you're saying, and we come back to you with very specific comments or questions. So, again, it's fabulous when you can answer, specific things that somebody's asking you because it demonstrates your expertise.
What's interesting is I have a really good friend that does some work with me. He's the director of the behavioral analysis program for the FBI, and his job is human sources. So he, his name is Robin Dreek, and he has to go out and build relationships with people and gather intel. Of course, the purpose for his intel is much different than both mine and I would imagine yours. But all the things you're saying is exactly the way that he does it, right? He wrote a book about building rapport, and one of the big things he talked about is just what you said, is that people don't get a chance to ever talk about themselves because nobody cares. So when someone opens up and says, hey, I want to hear about your life, so talk to me about your work, talk to me about all the things you know. It's very fulfilling, and it creates a very strong connection between you and that person. And a lot of times, and I know when I've actually used this, it's hard to get people to shut up, because they're now talking to you and they feel good. It's releasing chemicals in their brain that make them feel good, and they just can't stop talking about it.
Right.
Do you find that to be the same?
You have to know how to also control the conversation. It's not that it's okay to interrupt, but as I said, if we're having a conversation where it's a dialogue, it's back and forth, it's not just one person speaking. And if they're not the right people, which we determine very, very quickly, because one of the main goals of what we do is you have to have the right information. And the right information has 5 components. It has to be current, has to be accurate, has to be relevant, objective, and sufficient. It cannot just be information. When you have information, even a lot of information, it's more likely to be noise than to be the specific information that you need. And so it's really, again, it's a skill that you have to know, not only how to conduct the conversation, how to build rapport, but how to determine if the person you're speaking to is the right one. And if not, they will very often direct you to somebody else who can help. And you may only get one piece of good information from a conversation. It may not even be a lot. You may get, like when we're doing a project for a client, we have a whole bunch of issues that they're interested in knowing. And let's just say it's 20 issues. Well, when I speak to you, Chris, I may only cover 3 areas. And when I speak to Jordan, it may only be 1 area or 5 areas. So what we're covering varies with every conversation. It's not going down a list. It's trying to build a picture of what we need to know that's accurate, that reflects what's going on today, and indicates what's changing and emerging tomorrow. Because that's the only time you sell, is tomorrow. So what's happened in the past is interesting for background and for context and to understand a company or an industry, but the past is only good as as a foundation. And so you don't want to spend too much time on that, which is what most people do. They're gathering lots of information about what happened in the past. We live in a world in which the past is not an indicator of what is going on today or what will happen tomorrow. We constantly see headlines or articles or people commenting, and they use the word shocked, surprised, unexpected, different from. In fact, yesterday, the front page of the New York Times had the beginnings of an article on the stock market reaching the highest level it ever has. And in that very first blurb on the front page, it said, even the experts were stunned. That's the world we live in. And that's why you have to have current information, accurate, relevant, objective, and sufficient, rather than past information.
So, Seena, I have a question, which is, you did talk about controlling the conversation. Do you have any tips on doing that? Because I have that experience of a lot of people, they love to talk to me, but oftentimes when I try to interject or break the conversation or bring it back onto, getting it back on path and on target, they just can kind of completely ignore it. So what tips do you have on controlling the conversation?
You mean besides hanging up on them?
Yes, or walking away. And oftentimes it's even more difficult because it's a face-to-face. And I was just at our big information security conference in San Francisco last week at RSA, and everyone's talking, and I'm trying to do this march through the show floor to get from point A to point B, and everyone's talking. You can't just diss everybody, right? You're here to network and to build business. But at the same time, and so it's really hard, I find, when I'm personally engaged face-to-face, especially, to break off. Of course, when on your phone, you can always say, I'm sorry, I've got another call, or I've got another meeting. When they're in front of you, it's pretty difficult.
Well, I mean, I have certain techniques I use when I'm meeting people and just talking to them and networking, which is different than when I'm having a conversation on the phone. On the phone, we might say something like, well, that's really useful and specific, but if you don't mind, can we just review, maybe it was something that we just made reference to earlier, or if change the focus a little bit. So you have to just come in and, politely but firmly, shift the conversation to or ask something else, or say, well, that's really a lot more detail than what I was interested in knowing. Perhaps we can get back to that later. So it's very much the kind of things that you would do. Well, just think of it as like being on a first date. If you're with somebody who's just going on and on and on, I mean, you can't just get up from the table if let's say you're at a restaurant. So, it's not all that different from, the kind of skills that you might want to use, that you might use in a social setting as in a business setting.
So, in essence, what you're saying is you validate them first because they gave you something that is valuable, even if it's not valuable to you right now, but then you redirect with a question.
Stated perfectly.
Yeah.
You did good.
Thank you. So I get that every now and then. I listen, and then I actually have something that sounds semi-intelligent that comes out. So it happens once in a while.
Paid the big bucks.
Yeah, that's why. That's why I'm so good at this. Yeah, because that is a skill, I think, for any business person to have. And Ping's right about, I've seen it actually in action on her, that she'll be stuck in a conversation, and it's hard. If you don't, it's hard to redirect somebody, especially if they're going 100 miles an hour down one path. But this is a really nice technique, maybe, to stop the conversation, redirect it somewhere, and then maybe even bring it to a close sooner than you would been able to before without using this technique.
Right. And I mean, the overriding purpose of any conversation, whether it's social or business, but here we're focusing on business, is for you to get the right information, the information that will help you do your job better, make smarter decisions so that you accomplish what you want to do for your company or for your clients. And the more you can keep that picture in front of you, the more focused you will be on not getting caught up in a lot of things that are irrelevant. I mean, we live in a world in which there is so much information out there that people get either overwhelmed or they think that because they have information that they've gotten what they need, where in truth most people have a lot of irrelevant information that dances around the topic but is not specific or useful enough. And so it's really crucial to say, how important is this information? Is this really telling me what I need? And one of the big points that I think is really missing in business today is that they don't have sufficient information. And that might sound shocking because, again, as I said, we have so much information. But I find that companies and people make decisions based on extremely limited information. We see this all the time, for example, in the news media, where especially the talk shows, where there'll be a headline, something new is happening, and they ask people to call in and give their opinion. And all they know is a headline. They don't know anything. So think about think about this going forward. Almost any story you hear, again, whether it's business related or related to people, think about what you thought when you first heard it. Think about what you thought after the next day, 3 days later, a week later, 2 weeks later. As more and more information comes out, you change your perspective and what you believed to be true. But too often, we see companies and people making decisions based on extremely limited information. That may even, besides being extremely limited, we don't even know if it's right, if it's objective, and if it has, the necessary components. But they're basing it on very, very limited information.
So what would you say is the most important skill for a professional information gatherer to have? Or maybe set of skills if there's not one, but...
Yeah, like with most things, it's a whole confluence of things. But I would say an understanding of the business world. There are too many people that do work in which they're very good at doing their specific job, but it doesn't include the bigger picture, the external environment, so they're really creating something in a vacuum. And they have very little information about what's going on. So you really have to be attuned to the larger picture. This is an example of what I call knowing the external information. I mean, for example, a few years ago, the CEO of Coca-Cola told analysts that they didn't recognize that consumers were shifting to alternative beverages, and they missed the move. So you can have a fabulous beverage, a fabulous drink, but if you don't recognize what is changing and what could be not only competing against you, but also an opportunity for you to create an alternative beverage. So you can't just be insular and focused on your product or service or doing great graphic design or being a fabulous writer. The best writers don't just talk about a specific product or company, but they use analogies. They bring in other examples to help the reader understand what's really being said and how important it is.
Yeah, I almost thought that maybe you had a conversation with Ping before this podcast and she told you to say that, because she's always yelling at me about things like that. I think you described me to an extent. I'm really good at what I do, but I really stink at the business side of it, and that's why I need people to work with me that are great at business, because I think it's hard to blend those two skills together. Do you find that people who are generally really good at what they do also can be really good at the business end of it?
Well, as you said, I think it's very, very hard. But I think what happens is that people don't realize why that's necessary. So they haven't even considered it. And once they do, they very often shift their thinking. So it's the difference between a CEO who understands that there are many things that they have to bring to the table. It's not just knowledge of their products and industry, but they have to see much more of what's going on.
So how do they? How do they then? How does a person who is good at their industry get good at the business side?
Well, I mean, for me, I read a lot across a very diverse landscape, but, I understand that we all have very, very limited time, and it's depending on what your business, industry, function, and all that is. but I am a huge fan of the Wall Street Journal. They have changed so much over the years. I mean, at one time they were a financial publication. Absolutely not anymore. They're not only a business publication, but they have a lot of things going, a lot of sections as well as articles on lifestyle and people and other elements, and just even scanning the front page of their 4 sections every day will give you a lot more information about what's going on generally in business and the world. Yes, it also includes political items and a lot of financial information, but you have to find those sources, and hopefully it's several sources that you can just scan very quickly so that you're up to date on what's going on in business, and you're not just you're not just have a laser focus, which you're much more likely to be blindsided.
That's interesting advice, because I think in our industry, completely different, of course, but people will ask similar questions. So, how do you keep aware of the most current attacks on companies so that we can be protected? And the answer is exactly the same as what you just said. Maybe a different journal, not the Wall Street Journal, but it's taking some time every day to just read particular websites or particular information sources that will tell you what's happening right now. And then that keeps you aware. And it's not something you have to spend hours and hours and hours a day doing research, but spending a few minutes a day doing that reading, so it becomes part of your daily routine, and that keeps you aware of what's happening in this market.
And one of those things might be Google Alerts. You can set that up for free, and you can put in any term or name or business that you want, and it comes into your email every day, or you can do it weekly or every day, things that mention. You can scan the list very quickly and see if there's anything that's particularly relevant. So, like, I have 6 Google Alerts. I have one on my name, Seena Sharp, one on my book, Competitive Intelligence Advantage, one on my company name, Sharp Market Intelligence, one on the terms that describe my business. So I'm getting up to 6 of these a day, and as I said, you can change some of them to weekly. And at least it's a way to very quickly scan whatever Google is picking up. And again, understand that Google is limited, but it is another quick resource for finding out what's happening in business.
Now, before you mentioned the difference between Google and Bing, and I wanted to ask you then, but I didn't know if I heard you right. Were you saying Bing was a better search engine as far as business-related material goes?
Well, yes and no. I'm saying Google News and Bing have more specific and have somewhat more business information. I mean, it's still woefully insufficient compared to what you get if you go to your individual trade publications or trade associations or newsletters and things like that. But, Google News and Bing aggregate, so they're going to draw from a wide variety of sources. So they are better for business, but I still find them to be extremely insufficient. So it's a way to do it quickly. So you have to decide, are you looking for general information? Do you just need a summary? Do you just need service information? How deep are you going? But the point I want to drive home is that a lot of information that you need, you're not going to find from written sources, or it's going to come from what's called the hidden web. And the hidden web refers to, you have to drill down to each publication or each company individually. Very, very time-consuming, but again, more specific.
So one question I had, though, since we're talking about tools that we're using, would you consider social media as a tool, and how often do you use it for your information gathering? I mean, I think is that considered part of the hidden web?
Yes. Well, I would certainly consider it an important resource for specific purposes. We don't tend to use it for the work that we do, only because it's not relevant to what our clients are asking us. But if I were inside a company, I would certainly consider social media important. Forgetting the point of view of information going out, you're sending out, tweets or press releases or something like that. But I think it's very good to monitor, to know what people, company, the press is saying about you, because very often that's a heads up, an early warning, especially about complaints. Complaints are some of the best information a company can get. I'm not suggesting that every complaint is legitimate or relevant, but what I'm saying is that it makes you aware of how outside people, your customers, your vendors, maybe even your employees, what they are saying about you that you may not know.
So, again, then social media is great for that part because people tend to, it seems at least to us, people tend to put everything in their life on social media. And
and again, you have to figure out which is the best social media, because there's, you could spend hours and hours and hours to just get to one decent tweet, for example, or one chat room, that has a comment that's worthwhile paying attention to. So you have to decide what's important.
Yeah, because that's it. That's a very good point. Because again, in our industry, social media is very heavily used because we are looking for that emotional, personal connection, and then determining if it can lead to a vulnerable state for the company. Whereas I would imagine in your industry with competitive intelligence, that it's not as valuable unless they're tweeting or blogging or Facebooking about something to do with their industry and their product.
Right, and that you're going to find a lot less of that information. And you don't know who the source of the information is. That's really crucial. Is not just accepting information from anything that's printed, especially blogs. If you don't know who that person is, if that person isn't an expert, a known quantity, a known entity in that business, it's just somebody giving you their opinion. You can read it, and if it seems relevant, then try to check it out through other reliable sources, but you have to be very, very careful about using information that you find. One of the problems with not only blogs, but even when you go to Google, is you'll find lots of information. Number one, you don't know who the source is, and number two, it very often doesn't have a date. So you could be reading something from 2006.
Right. So, of course, that would be totally irrelevant. And even in our industry, something that old may be totally irrelevant, and I would imagine in the business industry, completely irrelevant.
So I just, caution people, it's not that blogs are bad or what people are saying isn't true. You don't know. So do you really want to spend your time on, again, that's that's part of what I would say, talking to the right people, whether you're reading it or whether you're talking to people. You have to have the right information that is accurate, and it's objective and it's external. It's not just some one person's opinion, unless again that person is considered somebody to pay attention to, like, for example, maybe a Guy Kawasaki.
Right.
With Warren Buffett or something. But beyond that, I'd be very, very cautious unless you know the source of the information.
Very, very good advice. So now we're coming to almost to a close of the time that we have with you today. So I think probably a couple things that our listeners always like. Besides your book, which is, just so we can say the title, Competitive Intelligence Advantage, How to Minimize Risk, Avoid Surprises, and Grow Your Business in a Changing World. That can be found on Amazon, Borders, basically any book site, right?
And it's an ebook also.
Okay, so you can get it on Kindle or ebook, and that's helpful. A lot of our guys like to read things on electronic format.
One of the things I would just say about that is that you can read it in sections. There, in each chapter, it's broken up into many, many different parts. You can just pick it up and read a little piece here, a little piece there, and has like more than 70 5-star reviews on Amazon, and it's considered very readable. I just got an email yesterday from a professor in China who said, literally, quote, the book was a page turner. So. Which was fabulous to read for a business book. But it's a very, very readable book, and it's filled with more than 70 examples. So it has lots of very pragmatic information in there.
Are there other ways that people can get information from you? Like, do you have a blog or a newsletter or other things that people can come to get info about this from you?
Yes, one of the things that I do is I write a short little, I guess you could call it a blog, although it's not in a blog form, what I call Sharp Insights. And what it is, it's about 200 words on what's changing and shifting in the marketplace globally. And so the whole idea is to tell you what's going on, what's changing, and to say, how can you apply this to your business? So even though it may not be in your industry, you can still get ideas from other businesses that are doing something successful. And you can sign up for Sharp Insights, and we ask for minimal information from you at sharpmarket.com, which is the website for my company.
And is that also where people can find info about you, like your Twitter or other things to follow you?
It is, and my Twitter handle is @Seena Sharp.
Oh, very easy. You made everything really easy to get to.
I know. Well, and actually, this is not just a trend. This is a fact in business. Two comments. People think trends. They're always looking for trends. Where trends, most of the time, if you ask them people what they are, they're really facts. They're things that have been going on forever. But one of the most important things a person can do to help themselves in business, or a company can do to be more successful, is to make things simple, easy, understandable. Whether it's how easy is it to work with you, or for a product or service, how easy is it to use.
Yeah, that's good advice too. Great advice. Are there any other? We have a lot of listeners who like to read a lot. So, are there any other books besides yours that you recommend on this topic, or topics that you mentioned today that you think should be in the library for someone who's interested in this?
Well, if somebody is interested in analysis, I would say there's an author. She's Australian, but she's written about 6 or 7 books on analysis, ranging from a lot of deep information on it to, I think, 1 or 2 that are very quick reads and much shorter, and it's Babette Bensoussan, B as in boy, Ensousssan, Babette Bensoussan, and she has a whole bunch of books on analysis if you want, how can I take this information someplace else. I mean, other books that I like anything by Malcolm Gladwell. I think the Heath brothers, the stickiness book that they have. So there are lots of great books out there.
Seena, I can't thank you enough. This has been great, and what you said about your book is 100% true. I found the way you broke up the topics and the subheadings made it easy to not felt obligated to read a whole chapter in one sitting. You can easily read a section, put a marker or a note, and then put it down and come back to it later. So it was for a business book, it was very readable because I didn't feel like putting it down mid-chapter I was going to be losing something or forgetting something super valuable, that I was able to come back and pick up right where I was and still get the point. So that's really a nice job on that.
I appreciate it.
And we appreciate you coming on the show. This was interesting for us.
I appreciate it also. And I talk to companies and business associations, so if any of your readers have a group they'd like to know more about this, be happy to speak to the group, do it globally. I'm going to be speaking in Connecticut in June, and in Southern California and in Brazil. So if anybody is looking for a dynamic presentation and on information that you very rarely hear about, please contact me.
Excellent. And they can do that on the website you gave us previously?
Yes, sharpmarket.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Seena.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ping and Jordan.
I don't know if we lost them.
Thank you. It was great to have you.
Thank you. Yeah,
wake up. That's a good way to get somebody to not continue talking to you, Ping. That was a good example.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. Intentional, though.
No one ever slams Ping, and now that's great.
But see, she can do it because she's Seena Sharp.
I know, but that's epic to hear someone do it so gracefully, too. Like, slap! There you go. Great way to ignore someone, Ping.
I wish I could do that more often.
Oh.
The subject matter expert who I wanted to engage with.
Yeah, but not to like our podcast guests. Do it to the people who are bothering you. No, you know what we do? We all mute our mics when we're not talking so background noise doesn't interfere. So it probably was just a muted mic. See, I'm making excuses for them. Isn't that nice? Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, thank you,
You
Seena.
want them to like you.
Yeah, well, I have to. I have to work with them, so.
Right. Thanks very much, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
No problem. Well, I'll ping you when this gets released, and you can help promote it, and then I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Great. Look forward to it.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. That was excellent. podcast. Great information, but I think the best part was Ping getting smacked down.
And then you used my name as a verb.
I did.
That is so disrespectful.
I did. Well, ping is a verb, to ping somebody. So what would be great is if ping pings somebody. Can you even do that? Can you even speak like that? Can you say sentences like that?
I would not. Jordan has to go now because, he's got parent units in town.
Wait, Jordan's leaving for good or just leaving for a couple seconds?
I need to pee really bad. So
Go ahead, go pee. Well, wait a minute.
Aren't we
right.
recording this?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
The world is allowed to know that I urinate.
No.
Do we have a running water sound?
No, but
Simulate pee?
if Dave was here, we would have it.
Yeah, Dave has failed us.
Again.
Okay, so call for papers for DerbyCon should be opening, I believe, April 1. I'm speaking for Dave's side. I was just on the DerbyCon website.
Wow, I can't believe how nice you are. I mean, really. You're like over here now, you're promoting Black Hat, you don't even work for them. You're promoting DerbyCon, you don't work for them.
Well, yeah. Well, okay, so I was made practice manager of education at Akivant about 2 weeks ago. So I'm building that program. And it would be good for me to continue to promote my friends and family.
I would agree.
Especially since we're all in the same business. Oh, and DerbyCon 3.0 is September 25th through 29th. And that includes 2 days of training prior to the 2 days of actual conference presentations. So everyone mark your calendars on Dave's behalf because he'll be sad if we all don't show up.
I'm really sad because I won't be there.
Why won't you be there?
I have another engagement that is that only weekend in September that I have another engagement that I cannot get out of.
By the way, you need to set an agenda for DEF CON because I personally don't have any reason to stay other than for
We need you.
SE. So, I mean, the problem is we should figure out what we're doing or what you're doing, how everyone's going to help, so on and so forth. Because I don't know if Jordan's going to be able to stay. Dave ran out on us last time.
I know.
So I think you should get an agenda out sooner than later so people can plan appropriately. That way Dave can't say, oh my God, he's probably going to leave again anyway because he's going to miss his family unless he brings his kids out to freaking...
It's a good suggestion, and I will. I had a team meeting with my team about the DEF CON setup and who was needed and what. So I will. Right now, I'm just waiting to hear back from DEF CON if I'm doing the full SECTF and the kids, or if I'm just doing the SECTF this year. And once I know that, then I'll have a clearer path of what needs to happen and when we can do things. But the podcast will definitely be Sunday, as it always is. Mm-hmm. So if you guys are able to stick around for that, that would, of course, be epic, because I think last year was great.
Even though Dave was gone.
It's okay. We filled him in with Eric, and
right.
Not as funny, but sorry, Eric, but
Yeah, well, we could have a guest. If Mitnick's there again, then maybe he'll sit on it.
I actually am working on a very interesting guest, which I will not say publicly on the podcast, but
very good.
Because in case it doesn't work out, but a very interesting guest for the podcast in Vegas there. So we'll see if that actually happens.
Wow, sweet. Sting's going to be on the podcast. That's awesome.
Sting, yes, that's exactly who I was thinking. Dang, man, you just released it publicly. I can't believe it,
man.
So, Jordan, before we all have to go, we need to hear this story.
About the unlawful imprisonment story.
Yes, because, obviously, we talk about your business a lot, but we never really talk about what happens behind the scenes. And then,
yeah, like case studies.
Yeah, and then I heard a story about someone being handcuffed at one of your...
Unlawful imprisonment. That guy could have gone to jail.
That's right. Let me see if I can recall all the deets.
Because, being 33 years plus 8 days is very hard in his memory now.
Yeah. We had a se.org podcast listener, and I remember telling a little bit of this story now, and he just came back to another program because he's in our platinum, which means you can come back as many times as you want for a year. So a lot of guys do that because it allows you to come back and keep working on your skills, etc. And so the first boot camp, or maybe the second one that he had, I want to say the first one, he brought his handcuffs that he had laying around, and or somebody had handcuffs, and he brought them. Now, they went to a club, they had a couple of beers, whatever, and they were rocking out doing their thing and talking to girls, and he goes up to talk to another student who's chatting with a girl, and he handcuffs himself to this girl after talking to her for a few minutes, and she's like, "Oh, this is your friend, haha, whatever. It's fine, funny, hanging out." And then she's like, "Okay, the joke's over." And he's like, I can't find the key to these handcuffs." And so they're sitting at a bar, like at a concert. It's like a loud venue. And this girl who's like probably 15 years younger than this dude, at least is standing there. She's handcuffed to this dude. And she's like, what the F is going on here? And so the student is like, "You're kidding, right, dude? You have the key to this." And he's like, "No." And this guy like carries lockpicks everywhere, and he didn't have the lockpicks with him this time because we made him leave the lockpick kit at home. We're like, "You're not going to need your lockpick kit at the bar." Like it's kind of nifty to have this at the bar, and he needed it, but it was his own fault. That was the difference. So they're walking around handcuffed together.
How was this girl reacting? I mean, literally,
she started freaking out slowly and held it together pretty well for a girl that was handcuffed to like this dude,
who she did not know.
Right? And her friends were around, so it was kind of like, okay, keep it together. She was definitely freaking out, but not making like a scene. But, the door guys are like, "All right, you guys need to leave." And he's like, "I'm handcuffed to this girl." And they're like, "Oh, really, dude? Come on."
Now, are your partners there
I'm
too?
sure they've seen that, though.
And my business partners are there, and they're like, "WTF, man? How did this happen?" And this somehow, like, some dude stumbles over and totally drunk off of his face and is like, "I got a handcuff key." And they're like, "No way."
Are you kidding?
So he breaks out a standard handcuff key and unlocks the handcuffs. And this girl, of course, like runs for the border after being unlocked from our mutual friend here. But I was so glad that I was not there for this event. Because I mean, I'm always the crisis handler when it comes to this type of thing, and I'm like, I would have just opted out of that one. I do not need to deal with that. I just thought that was so funny, and I'm like, of all like of course it would be this guy who like handcuffs himself to a female and then like can't find the key.
Leave it. I can't. That's like, wow. Have you ever had anything like this in any of your classes before?
No, nobody has ever like handcuffed themselves or done anything of that nature. No, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, there's been some weird stuff happening, at AOC, at the Arbitrum. There's always funny stuff happening, but this is the first time that we've actually been like, okay, a student is handcuffed to like a random girl at a bar and we don't have a key.
Now, did you have to tell this girl like, "Hey, this is part of a class where..."
Hell no.
No, okay.
No, we were just like, this is a guy that we know from something or other. And,
we were in prison together.
He's okay. Yeah. What's funny is a lot of times when girls are like, "How do you know each other?" Since we do have such diverse groups of guys, we'll have like Asian dudes from China and then like European dudes from Denmark. And then there'll be like a dude from Canada and then a Southern guy who's like older than everyone.
It's a tour group.
Well, a lot of times the guys do joke around. They're like, "Oh, we met in prison," just as a joke, right? So I'm just laughing, thinking that first she hears that these guys met in prison, and then she's handcuffed to one of them.
Oh, that is a crazy story. I can only imagine how you must have felt looking at that situation.
By the time I heard about it, luckily everybody was uncuffed, but we actually had to ban handcuffs from the rest of the program. We're like, we don't need these out. Nobody needs to bring these to the bar anymore. These are like the funny part of these things has henceforth expired.
Yes.
No longer interested in that. So.
Oh, okay, guys. That is a great story. I think it's probably a good place to end. Another great podcast. Another one without Dave. I don't know what's happening. We'll have to hopefully get him back on the podcast sometime soon. But if you want to check us out, you got social-engineer.org and, of course, social-engineer.com. Keep checking our training dates there. We'll be adding them as we get them. You can check us out on irc.freenode.net, on channel social-engineer, Twitter, we're Human Hacker, or SOC Engineer Inc. for the corporate Twitter. We'll see you guys next month. See ya.
But no one's really looking at my counterfeited badge. Even still, though, there's not a chance to see. You can tell by how I walk, I've got somewhere else to be. Cause I'm confident, like I'm in a hurry, like I've got work to do, like I'm going places. Welcome one and all to this fun competition, except nobody knows if there's any opposition. Face so friendly, smile disarms, everything's good, no cause for alarm. Cause I'm like you, and likewise the same. But for you this is work, and for me it's a game. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. Next round starting, believe that I'm no signal, my battery is finished. Hey, could I go and use your phone for a minute? Thanks, yo, I had to make a call to play it down while my rootkit exfilled your data to the cloud. Plain to stall, stand appalled, gotta take my time scanning all your systems, the ones you didn't wipe. Scamming y'all, I got terabytes of drives. Cannonball in the dumpster when I dive. Black and white, all the info with the details. And what type of person really prints out emails? Still intact, all the sentences and questions. I mean, paper shredders really aren't that expensive. Yup, we want it all, the kit and caboodle. It's not that impressive, I just know how to Google. Found the CEO with the social network name, sir. Nope, it's dual core, we're just leveraging the framework. Welcome one and all to this fun competition, except nobody knows if there's any opposition. Face so friendly, smile disarms, everything's good, no cause for alarm. Cause I'm like you, and likewise the same. But for you this is work, and for me it's a game. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. Next round starting, believe that I'm playing. Welcome one and all to this fun competition, except nobody knows if there's any opposition. Face so friendly, smile disarms, everything's good, no cause for alarm. Cause I'm like you, and likewise the same. But for you this is work, and for me it's a game. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. If you know what I'm saying. Welcome one and all to this fun competition, except nobody knows if there's any opposition. Face so friendly, smile disarms, everything's good, no cause for alarm. Cause I'm like you, and likewise the same. But for you this is work, and for me it's a game. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. Next round starting, believe that I'm playing. Know what I'm saying. Know what I'm saying. Give a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying.